Patterson.
Thanks, Chair. Earlier this evening I asked your Finance Department colleagues about issues with corporate travel management overcharging, and they redirected me to ask you questions here to the extent to which it related to parliamentarians' travel. Just firstly, you're familiar with the media reports about CTM overcharging UK customers to the tune of $162 million?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Christina Grant, CEO of the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority. Yes, I am aware of the media.
Thank you. There's obviously been that international media coverage, but there's also a story which has just gone up on the Australian newspaper tonight by Liam Mendes, where he interviews the Australian boss of CTM, Jamie Ferris. I'm not sure if that's correct pronunciation. But among other things, he insists he's not standing down, and his board hasn't asked him to stand down. But worryingly, when asked if other customers should be concerned about overcharging, specifically Australian taxpayers, he said, "I can't comment." So what action has IPIA taken since this media reporting came to light about the contracts we have with CTM?
Thank you, Senator. So we have met with CTM and received their assurance that the current media issues don't affect the contract that we have in place for parliamentary travellers. That is the best information that we have at this time, but obviously the situation is evolving.
I'm sure they would say that, though. What kind of independent assurance do we have that we're not also being overcharged, as they appear to have done in the United Kingdom?
I guess the way that our contract works is a little bit different to the way that most contracts work, because we are not charged when you book the flight. We are charged after you take the flight, and then you would see all of the flights that are taken by your office in your regular expenditure report. And so we have a checking process, I guess, built in because of the way that we are billed and the way that we report expenditure and have you check your expenditure. So it would be highly likely that we would be aware if there were sort of significant inconsistencies. We do from time to time have incorrect flight details on expenditure reports and have those addressed, but we are not aware of any large-scale issues insofar as how the billing has worked under the current contract.
So that would certainly hopefully capture any instances where we're being charged for flights that weren't actually taken, for example, but it might not account for, say, a margin that is being taken by the company. How confident are you that the margin is a reasonable commercial rate and not gouging as appears to be in the UK?
So under our contract, we do have access to Australian government fares, which is a little bit different, I guess, to the arrangements that may be in place in the UK and Europe, but I don't have a huge amount of detail. Based on what we know so far, we have been advised that the Australian CTM business is not affected by the issues, and it's CTM that has advised us of that. And we are currently watching the situation unfold. We obviously regularly review our expenditure with CTM, and we have parliamentarians check the expenditure with CTM as well. I think if there was broad-scale issues, we would probably be aware of them, noting the volume of flights that we deal with. But we will continue to monitor the situation to identify whether the issue might have impacted our clients in any way.
Look, I hope you're right, but I think a bit more scepticism is warranted. I mean, the media reporting shows that CTM accounts in the UK were signed off by their auditor, which was PwC, I think, for 14 years.
Yeah.
It was only when a new auditor, Deloitte, was brought in that this was identified. So if even an auditor who has access to the company's books can't identify it in 14 years and it takes a new auditor to bring it to light, I don't think assurances from the company are sufficient to be confident that Australian taxpayers haven't lost out here.
Yeah, I would agree, obviously.
So what other steps can you take, or is there a whole-of-government process that will occur to satisfy us?
There may well be a whole-of-government process, and that's a Department of Finance arrangement. We will work with our colleagues in the Department of Finance going forward.
They haven't notified you of one? They haven't said, we're investigating this, or we've set up this process to look into this?
Not at this point, but I would say it's very early in the process, and facts are still being established in relation to what has happened internationally and what could potentially have happened here.
Yeah, and I will ask them further questions about that tomorrow, because obviously this is a whole of government provider, not just for parliamentarians to travel on their staff. But just one issue in this article in The Australian tonight, which really leapt out at me as a cause for concern, was a quote from Doug Tynan, who's a hedge fund manager that tracks CTM. And he's quoted in The Australian as saying, "Ever since we started following them in 2018, corporate travel management has reported profit margins starkly higher than any of their competitors. This alone makes no sense in a competitive industry where everyone is doing the same thing, booking airfares and hotel rooms," he said. And he believes that, quote, "Friday's revelations is likely just the start. Just wait until auditors take a proper look at the British Virgin Islands joint ventures that house part of the company's Asian arm. That is a structure that no one's talking about yet, but it never made any sense to us." I mean, if that's right, and I'm not an expert on these matters, Mr Tynan is, that's pretty alarming, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a media article. It hasn't been substantiated. You know, there's not really a lot for me to kind of comment on fact-wise. All I can say is that our contract is very specific. We do pay service fees in relation to the level of service that CTM provide to our clients. You know, 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We have a different level of service under our contract with CTM. And so the arrangements are a little bit different to the Australian government arrangements, but the whole of Australian government fares still apply in relation to IPIA's contract. So there are some similarities, but I guess our contract's quite specific, and so I think it's likely if there were significant issues we would be seeing them, but we are very open to considering the matter and continuing to look for issues and for working with the Department of Finance should that be required.
When did CTM take over the contract for parliamentarians? Just a couple of years ago?
Yeah, 2022.
Yep.
We obviously follow the Australian government procurement requirements, and so we are actually approaching the market at the moment.
Right. Oh, that's timely, I guess. Minister, is the government concerned by these reports?
Well, naturally concerned by the reports, and we'll be monitoring the situation very, very closely. My recollection is that under the procurement requirements, the previous organisation that provided the service could no longer bid for a continuation of their contract, and so that opened it up to other organisations. Under our free trade agreement with the United Kingdom, of course, the United Kingdom have got the right to bid for service contracts in Australia, so we can't stop these companies from making a bid.
I think CTM is actually Australian owned, not UK owned.
There definitely is an Australian business, but I understand they have a UK arm and maybe a European arm as well, so I think it's multifaceted.
Right, well there you go, I've learned something new about them. But in that case, we were entitled under our free trade agreement to bid for contracts in the...
Let's not hold this up as a success story of the bilateral trade relationship if it turns out these reports are correct.
Kingdom, no, that's right. But look, as Ms Grant just said, obviously if the contracts are coming up shortly, then that gives an opportunity for us to have a much closer look at this and make another decision.
Minister, you said that the government would be concerned by this and will be monitoring the situation. Has the government done actually anything proactive to investigate this situation to satisfy ourselves that Australian taxpayers haven't been defrauded by hundreds of millions of dollars?
Ms Grant already indicated that she's made an approach to the...
No, I'm asking about the government. I'm asking about ministers.
Well,
are you aware if your colleague Senator Gallagher has directed any action by the Department of Finance?
Well, I appreciate that this information has only just recently come to light, but we'll take all the steps necessary to ensure that Australian taxpayers are getting value for money through their travel organisation.
Yeah, I mean, it appears that $162 million has been defrauded from the UK government, according to their own auditors. If it's anything like that in Australia, that would be an egregious theft of Australian taxpayers' money, wouldn't it?
Well, at this stage, nobody's suggesting that. No, forewarned is forearmed, or forearmed is forewarned. No, look, the issues require detailed examination, and we'll surely do that, Senator Patterson.
Okay. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Chair.